guys, what's up? Today we're talking about what's the difference between human trafficking in the U.S. versus in other countries. Now, just to get started, before we hop right into it, there's two things that you should know about human trafficking. That one, there is labor trafficking, and two, there is sex trafficking. So now let's hop right into it, and yeah. Y'all know that I can't start my video without mentioning my matcha. And I gotta give a matcha update. I know I've been abandoning you guys with my whole matcha drinking. I don't have it again today, but I just went out with my mentor, and so we got Starbucks, and I had the pistachio latte, which was amazing. So if you haven't tried that out, get that. That is probably my next two up from matcha, but I don't know how to make the pistachio one, and that's gonna be a struggle. But what also I have been drinking is the pop culture. So I'm a huge health nut, and I mean, like, besides kind of like splurging sometimes on like some fancy, not so healthy drink, for the majority, I am a pretty healthy person, and I love cooking and all that stuff. But pop culture, I really like them. Sponsor me? I'm just kidding. No, that'd be cool if you did. But no, I really like it because I don't like sparkling water, but I also am not like a huge fan of soda because it's gonna be super unhealthy for you. But pop culture, and I forget the other brand anyway, but it's like in the same like space in the market where you can get it. But I really like these, and the cherry one's my favorite. But that's what we're drinking today. So I'll give you an update, and I'll try my best to have a matcha next time so I can give you guys an update on that. But anyway, from Starbucks, go grab the pistachio one. But let's get into the actual meaning of this video. Okay. Also, this video might go all over the place because either I'll get really passionate about it and start rambling, or I can get really emotional about it because this hits home to me. And that's why I'm going to be sharing part of my testimony. I share more about this on my Instagram. So if you're interested in that, go follow my Instagram. But so I'm going to start off with, and I have notes on the side, but I want to start off with the fact that human trafficking is even in the Old Testament Bible. It is in the New Testament Bible. It is in today's society. It is not something new. Whether it's in the U.S. or it's not in the U.S., it happens everywhere. The basis of human trafficking is the fact that we have stirred away from God, that we just don't care to obey him anymore. And, you know, when we don't obey him, we end up using people, we end up hurting people for the benefit of yourself, for the benefit of your company, for the benefit of, you know, whatever means you're doing it by, but it's not godly means. Like, God would never want somebody to hurt another person or use that other person for personal gain. And, you know, whether that is financially or for pleasure or for anything, like, that is using somebody. And I know a lot of individuals will have conversations around these topics and include God in it, and they'll have such resentment and misunderstanding about, you know, the most thing I've heard is that, oh, you know, if God is real and if God is a great and good God, then why does he allow bad things to happen? Or why, you know, why does the Bible have trafficking in it? And like, why would God like condone that, basically? And it's not like he condones it. There's so many other sins in the Bible, and that's one of them. And you know, when it says obey your slaves in the Bible, it is not talking about, all right, God's condoning slave masters and you have to obey the person that is basically abusing you. Like, that's not in the context. And I think there's a resentment and there's a hurt and there's a misunderstanding when individuals say that, and it's not, that's not God's meaning. What God's meaning is, you know, obey the person who is above you. That goes into when, you know, we are called God's servants, and a lot of people have that like hurt towards it, like, oh, I don't want to be anyone's servant, or I don't want to be anyone's slave. And it's in a different context. It's not in an abusive context. It's in, I will obey my master because he has what's best for me and he has that authority over me. But again, people with hurt and misunderstanding will think, oh, God condoned trafficking, he condoned all these sins. And it's just like, the Bible has a lot of bad things. That doesn't mean everything in the Bible God was pleased with, and that just happens when we take things out of context. But the next thing I wanted to bring up is that we have to understand that the individuals who are perpetrating in these situations, they do have the chance of salvation. They do have the chance of repentance. And again, that is up to them. God did not make robots. He did not create us to obey and be like in those movies I see people like in a trance and just obeying like a robot. Like, God didn't create us like that. He gave us free will, and I think that is the biggest blessing that we ended up taking advantage of, because just like the enemy, anyone, like everyone, it's a creation of God. The enemy, if like in the beginning, was a creation of God, that he chose to do wrong, and we have a choice to do wrong as well. And that's not God's fault, that's our fault, for choosing wrong and for not knowing better, not seeking to know better. But everyone has a chance. Well, not the enemy, but everyone on earth, has still a chance to repent, has a chance to, get right with God, no matter what you've done, no matter, if you were a murderer, or, you committed adultery, or, you had a lot of sexual sin, or whatever, you're a liar, you're a thief, anything. Like, even if you think it's so bad that God won't forgive you, like, He will forgive you. And that's just His endless grace. I mean, He's asking that we show Him that we really mean this repentance. But, and I think that's another video about how we can sometimes miss the blessing and miss the growth of what God has planned for us because we can't forgive ourselves. And that's a different type of healing, and it's an intense type of healing that I think is for another video. But I've had a testimony. If you know my testimony, I was exploited as a child, by my family. And, growing up, it was, obviously the constant need to have shelter. And I obeyed whatever was said to happen. And that kind of put me in that, it groomed me into the mindset of doing whatever, somebody tells me to do. And it groomed me into, kind of what happened when I was 18, when I was trafficked. And so, I mean, but the thing is that, of course, when I didn't have Christ with me, I was very angry and I was sad, but I was also that person who was kind of groomed not to get mad at others, but to inflict it on myself. And so I was never able to, let people take accountability for what they did to me. And I always blamed myself, which went into a lot of self injurious behaviors and all of that stuff and substance abuse. But, my parents and my trafficker, like, when I have Christ, like when I got Christ in my life, I started praying for them, and I realized that the last thing I wanted to see them was in hell. And I realized the greatness of God's mercy and grace and forgiveness, and it terrified me more of the thought of seeing the people that hurt me the most in hell than holding on to that unforgiveness. And I think that kind of made me a better person today, is the fact that Christ showed me that I should be able to forgive everyone, and that there's a greater fear that we should have of not forgiving somebody and not allowing them, because I think there is a spiritual attack of people not forgiving you. And then you hold that onto yourself, and just like, you're holding that unhealedness or whatever. And, I went to a different topic with that on my Instagram. Um, but I still hope that I find out that, they don't go to hell, because God has shown me that greater terror of hell, and I hope that no one goes there. I don't care what they did to me, what they did to somebody else. I hope that they come to that point in their life where they can um, turn their life around, really. And but it's also biblical to leave individuals who reject God. And I think that that goes into my other kind of point, where I would be getting into later, is the fact that, there is a big stigma about, individuals where it's like child or young adult who they run away from their family, and, it's just like they're labeled as, let's say they do get into prostitution willingly, or they do get into sex trafficking, which is unwillingly and with force, fraud, and coercion, or they just run away in general. I mean, nobody runs away with no reason. And whether, but we just tend to, and society has built that picture in our mind that individuals who run away are the ones to blame, that there's something wrong with them. But we never really look at, all right, why would they do that? What was so bad that they did that? And that kind of goes into when we look at other countries, when we look at sex trafficking and runaways in other countries, we tend to have a lot more compassion towards them because we think about, the classic like picture like this, and I'll put it here, and just we think about how that they don't have a lot of space, or they don't have really nice stuff like America does, or that it's just full of poverty. And I mean, just like in the U.S., the majority of individuals who are trafficked and end up prostituting themselves, and I don't even like the word prostitute because I mean, yes, it is the same thing as saying selling yourself. But I hate that there's just like this like there's not knowledge around that word, and to really understand why people will get to that point of selling themselves. And so, when we think about different countries versus us that deal with this sex trafficking and and exploitation, we really have to think about, okay, but in America, most people who are in those positions in life, they are from the foster care system. They are runaways. They have poverty. They have a lot of trauma in the household, especially. And so, I mean, really, we just have this stigma that America is like the biggest and greatest and whatever. But really, I mean, if you think about it, and I don't know if a lot of people know about this, but other countries are, like basically, bringing their adolescents and bringing their underage children and young adults to America to be trafficked. Like, we are the ones actually sometimes even supplying the other ones that are coming to the U.S. And especially when Biden and Kamala Harris, actually, what we have to realize is that under their authority, and under, Kamala Harris wasn't really in authority in that place, but when Biden was, there was actually a lot more sex trafficking because he was having such porous filtration systems with who can come in and out of the United States. And so what was happening is that adults were just taking in children for the purpose of sex trafficking, and no DNA tests were made, so anybody could grab a kid and say it was theirs and they wouldn't question it. And it was a huge thing. I mean, regardless of just even like the classic like going through security and like just bringing children, I mean, there's a lot of illegal ways that individuals are doing it. But we think of like land of the free, home of the, more of the, not brave, but home of the blind. A lot of people are blind to the stuff that happens in the U.S. and the underground trafficking systems that are still today, especially in the celebrities. And there's a lot more people who have that personal testimony of celebrities, and the type of LA, Hollywood, and just everywhere trafficking systems that we still have in today in America. So, I mean, I think we just have this blinds over our eyes of like the fact that like, oh, other countries need more compassion towards sex trafficking and all this stuff. And I'm just like, what about the ones happening in our neighborhood? What about the ones happening right under our nose? Like, we always think of, probably a lot of people have this same like idea of, okay, in the United States, it's like pretty rare. If it does happen, it happens in strip clubs, it happens in like massage parlors and barber shops, but like, it still happens in hotels. It still happens on the street. It still happens. And now it's even happening more likely in classic apartments, like classic homes. And, not every, like, trafficker or pimp is like, just in a trap house or whatever. Like, it can be family members. Like, people can be trafficked within their family, and their family members can sell them to other people. And we just have to take everything into account and stop being blind just because, like, we're America, and we just look at Africa and these other countries that's just like, oh, they're so less than them, we're so fortunate. I mean, like, what about in the Bible when it warns us about, like, wealth and fortune? Like, it can make us very egotistical, and we can take advantage of money. Half the people with millions and millions of money, they get depressed and they get suicidal and they get all these different, like, lows in their life. Why? Because they don't have Christ, and wealth does not bring you spiritual fulfillment, and you end up using your money and you end up getting in this really wicked mindset. Because, I mean, if you think about it, an over amount of wealth can become very easily idolatry. And so that's one open door to sin. And when one open door is there, the enemy has a whole foothold. Not foothold, I don't know, I forget the saying, but it has a whole, like, entryway into your life, and it can just keep adding and adding and adding. But the other part really that I wanted to speak about is the fact that why it happens in the first place. Why? It's because there's a demand and there's a need met by the other party. So an individual, a child, even an adult who is trafficked, there is a need in their life, whether that is love, whether that is shelter, drugs, and that is a gateway that most traffickers and pimps and people who exploit people, they'll use something that they need. It is because, I've had a lot of Christians, say that the pyramid of, like, your needs, and I'll put it here, but it's like a pyramid of your needs, and, like, how your needs need to be met to be, like, functioning as a full individual. And I've had a lot of Christians say that, like, God is everything, and, like, that doesn't really, like, count for Christians. And it's just like, it does. We're humans, and there is psychology that goes into Christianity. Like, as much as we are spiritual is combined with our bodies. And like, you can, I'll explain it, maybe I'll make another video specifically about this chart. But when we think about that chart and that idea of the fact that needs need to be met, individuals will do anything. It is survival instincts. It is the fact that that person, especially a child, and a young adult, needs something, and sometimes they don't even realize what they are trading to do it. And especially when it's just themselves. And in other countries and even in America, some will do it so that they can provide for others. How many individuals go into willingly prostituting themselves and selling themselves so that they can take care of their child. And doesn't matter if they had it outside of marriage or not, they're still a person and they have those needs. And yes, of course they can come to Christ, and we should be able to preach to them and to tell them that there is hope, and that they don't have to provide in that way. But some individuals need to do that. They need to take care of their family. They need to take care of, whether it's a child or a brother or a sister or their parents. That's the last thing. I mean, it is very sad, but sexual intercourse is something that, when you don't have money, that is, sadly, we've made that into free economy. And that is why it's the hugest economy and financial system in the whole world, is the fact that half of it is just ourselves. Like, you don't need anything. You don't need to be anything super special. All you need is the sacrifice of your own body, and everybody, sadly, is capable of doing that, male or female, no matter what age you are at. And so it's just something that we added on money to. And so when an individual is vulnerable and needs their needs met, that's the last thing that they have. And it's a different thing, because a lot of people can look at, okay, well, like, they're willingly doing it, and, like, they have some type of conscious level of what they're doing, so it's kind of like their fault. And what a lot of people don't realize is that, yes, it is wrong and nobody should be doing that, but that's why there's a thing that people need to understand with trafficking and, with America and other countries. I mean, it's very similar, but we just have this bias that America doesn't have it that bad. So I'm gonna wrap this up with, healing and a little bit of my testimony. So, with healing, I think that there needs to be healing on both sides. Not a lot of people are, focusing on the fact of, all right, why are these traffickers and pimps doing what they're, doing? There was honestly this one individual, and she was working with this couple, and, he was, I think, 19, and she was like 16 or something. But anyway, it was her boyfriend, and he started like basically pimping her out. And she asked him, it was like the counselor or whatever, and she was like, "Why are you doing this?" And he was just like, "I don't know. I saw it and I needed money, and she agreed to it." And so, I think we have to realize that such vulnerability of anyone can just start selling people, and how easy that can happen. But also the healing and mindset of just like, why are people doing this? Like, is it this really, I mean, it's everything. It's socioeconomics, it is poverty, it is trauma, and then on top of that, people are doing it because they have this lack of God. They have this lack of wisdom and knowledge of who God is and why they are doing is wrong. And a lot of individuals who do criminal activity is because, one, of course, the lack of God, but also the fact that they have a lot of healing to do. And, I've mentioned this before, and I'm working on a project to kind of really emphasize and explain the impact of the lack of healing and how much it impacts our sin. And I think that if we all really focused on healing, and maybe even start out, find if it's not spiritual healing, start out with healing in general, we would become a better informed society of just actually dealing with things that wouldn't lead to sin. Again, I'm working on a project, and I'll keep you guys updated on that. But I think that there's a very big blind that even people who think that they are healed might not actually be healed. And I dealt with that personally. And for those who, have either been with me in person or just see me on social media, maybe a lot of people didn't know, and I didn't really tell a lot of people, but around like 5 months ago, I hit a really big depression because I was able, of course, and I shared my testimonies many times about what happened when I was 18 and I was trafficked. And, but the thing is that I was numb and I was dissociated when I said that I did not have any feelings towards it because I numbed myself, because I had so much shame and guilt because I was manipulated to do certain things that I didn't want to do. And I blamed myself, but, I came to a point where 5 months ago, my body was finally safe enough and felt safe enough to process what really happened, on an emotional level, not a logical level, because that's different. And to, go through the shame and go through the guilt and go through really what happened. And I was having panic attacks, and a lot of thoughts that I had in the past came up. And so I reached out for help. And so I really actually, I'm honest about my situation, and I hope that this can bring more comfort for people to ask for help, and it's okay to get help. And I ended up starting, getting a resource to help me, and therapy twice a week, and, actually soon starting EMDR. And for those who don't know what EMDR is, I'll put it here. And I'm really excited to do that, actually. So either I'll be doing therapy 2 to 3 year times a week, but it's been helping out a lot. Man, got through a lot of different, things that I haven't processed. And, the enemy just wants you to think that you're done, or that you're done healing, or that you went through something, and that, that you're okay. And I think we have to realize the depth, especially within complex trauma and trauma in general, is that our mind, especially when it's elongated trauma, goes through a very deep process of numbing ourselves to protect ourselves. And we need to be kind to ourselves that it is protecting us, but it can also prevent us from really processing the really hard stuff that happened to us. And so, yeah, it was a really hard time for me. Yeah, a lot of panic attacks, a lot of crying and everything, and dissociating and not believing that it happened, and denial, and all the stages of grief, and in and out. And it's just, but I'm very glad that, God would, God allowed me to have that place where, and resources that I was able to get help and feel comfortable receiving help. But yeah, I am doing a lot better, and so I'm very grateful. And I've been praying to God, and so I know He's bringing me through this, and I know that God's timing is everything. I knew that if I, would have spent time these past years, processing it, I wouldn't be ready. And I know God, because I've been trying and, having daily relationships with Him, he brought it up when I was ready to process it. It's hard, and it's not something I wanted to do, but I knew He brought it up at the right time, and I knew that, yeah, that He did it because He knew I could go through it, and He was with me. And so I think that I wouldn't have been able to process it and to reach out for help if I didn't have Him. So He's definitely been giving me the strength to, and you know, it's not easy, but it is possible. And so, again, I am always here for assistance or just to support you if you need it. So that's what I got today, and just realized that, there is this deception that other countries, could have it worse, or, it doesn't really happen in America, and it does happen in America, and sometimes even it comes to America from other countries. And so what we have to realize is that we have to realize the bigger picture of why sex trafficking is happening, and it's because people need deliverance and healing, and need to stop doing these demonic works. But we also have to realize that there is a need of why individuals actually end up getting in those situations, and it's not their fault. It's not anyone's fault for having needs that weren't met, and it's not their fault for falling into manipulation. And even if they have needs that need to be met and they do it willingly, most of the times, and I've seen many times, that prostitution and, willingly selling yourself can end up in trafficking, and that's not consensual. So there's many things that go into it. So I hope this brought some, hope to somebody. But I just hope we spread more light about truth of this. So that's what I got today. So God bless you guys. Bye.